All right, guys. Hey, it's me, Professor Wright, over at Eastern New Mexico University, here with another quick throwing demonstration for you today. If you're in my class and for some reason you need to utilize a extra video lesson, that's why I do this. If you miss the live demo or if I'm ever out for something like that, yeah, you'll know why you're watching this. But yeah, this should help you with some more practice and progress in your throwing lessons. Today's lesson is about how to shape and form a bowl. My first throwing demo was about how to make a cylinder, and then I have another video about how to shape that cylinder after the fact. But then what we want to focus on today is how to make a bowl, and not just to take the shapes that we've been working on and make it wider and rounder, but to actually specifically how to throw a bowl with the plan of putting a foot ring on it, with the plan of trimming it, and not just trimming it to clean it up, but to actually create a ring on the bottom that helps it stand, and it also lightens up some of the weight. And let me go ahead and show you what I mean by that, or an example of a foot ring. It's something like this, right, where we actually, after we throw today, I will have a separate video. I'm not going to demonstrate this today. It'll be a separate one. But after anytime I throw a bowl, I always leave extra clay down here, which will actually help me create the shape, create the form. And then when it's leather hard, I flip it over, and on the wheel, I will trim away some of that excess clay. And then I like to leave this foot ring, which also is something I do because it helps the bowl sit a little bit more flat and a little more level on a tabletop. Here's another version from that first bowl was one that I made. This is one made by my mentor. A little bit, we both make like pretty deep foot rings. They don't always have to be this deep, but I like to make a pretty substantial foot. I just think it makes it a little bit better statement, makes it a pedestal. But anyway, I'll get into more details as to why we trim later, but the whole point of why I'm bringing it up now is during this throwing activity to make bowls, we're not just, like I said, making like wider, rounder cylinders. We're actually changing a few things in order to be able to make these foot rings later. So I did a drawing as well. I've got several nice little diagrams for you guys today. This drawing, I did to sort of demonstrate if we were to cut our pieces in half today after we're done, what it really should look like. And the main point here is that the big one is that we're going to leave extra clay down here at the bottom. It's going to be quite a bit thicker than if we were just throwing a plain cylinder. And then we actually also leave a little bit more clay down here in these areas, what we would call like the ankles of the pot, where it transitions from floor to wall. We leave that a little thicker in order to support that outward movement and that centrifugal force of making this shape, this outward shape of a bowl. And then, like I said, again, I'll reuse this drawing again when we talk about trimming, because we will talk about how to get rid of this clay, and then of course the clay that's here in the bottom that's going to turn into a foot ring. I will say one of the most common mistakes I see students make when they're learning to make bowls that they're going to trim is they just don't leave enough clay here. I mean, you don't want to leave like pounds and pounds of clay down here, but if you leave a little too much clay, you can always trim more, right, to make more of a foot ring. You can always get rid of the clay, but if you don't leave enough for a foot ring, right, if you make this bottom real thin, it basically becomes impossible to have enough clay to make a foot ring, right, because you're not going to be able to add back. You're just going to be trimming away. So yeah, we'll talk about that more when we get to the trimming demo, but I wanted to show you this because it's part of the process of learning to make bowls like the way that I teach it. So any case, yeah, there you go. Hopefully you can see those well. Now I have my wedged clay here. As far as throwing tools, it's just the typical throwing tools for today. Nothing crazy. I do have a trim tool on the wheel, if you can see this, but I'm not going to use this today per se. It's just going to be, I just put it there because, yeah, we can refer to it later. Also, something I wanted to point out is in this video, I am aware that it's cropped quite a bit closer. You might not see my face the whole time. I'll lean in so you can see stuff, but I kind of figure if you saw my full throwing demo, you saw all the full body movements and stuff that you might sort of need to know, but getting a little bit closer for these more detailed throwing sessions should help you. I don't know, it just makes you see a little bit better, and it's not as important in this case that you see my face and everything that I'm doing, as far as posture and stuff like that. But in any case, yeah, I've got my clay ready to go for a bowl. You are going to use more clay for a bowl than you would necessarily for a mug or just a plain cylinder. This is a little over 2.5 pounds, I think. I usually say between 2 and 3 pounds. But yeah, I usually go 2.5 to 3. But yeah, that's what this one is. I'm gonna go ahead and get it started for us. You know, centering is just the usual sort of centering process of coning with T-Rex arms and all that stuff. Keeping your elbows in, getting it into a symmetrical shape at the center of the wheel is really all the goal is with any centering, okay? And now, when I taught cylinders, I always teach students to start with a low, wide dome sort of shape, and you can totally do that with a bowl. That's gonna work great. But something I told you not to do when making cylinders is starting with a centered shape that's like a taller, almost more straight up and down cylinder, because that is difficult to shape into a cylinder later. But you can actually do a shape like this to form a bowl as well. But if you don't want to mess with like changing this shape too much, yeah, a nice low dome still works for forming a bowl. Yeah, so pretty much centering step is all the same. Now we're going to form the inside of the pot, and this is where it's going to start to get a little bit different from your typical cylinder shape that you would make, right? The big one being that we're going to stop a little earlier. As I've already mentioned, we want a little bit more thickness of clay down at the bottom in order to be able to make the foot ring, to leave enough clay for the foot ring. So I just stopped my thumb, you know, its descent a little bit earlier than I do with just a plain like flat cylinder that I'm not going to trim a foot ring into. I kind of, if you want an example, right, if you were to put your pinky here to the side of your piece, maybe imagine it's like 2 pinkies thick or something like that. And again, yeah, better to go a little on the thicker side than too thin. Also, especially because as you keep working, it might get a little bit thinner as well. So yeah, just stop your thumb kind of early. That's the first difference. And then honestly, the next big difference is something that if you've taken my class and you've seen my general throwing demonstration, I always tell students to do the skater thumb, right? After you push down to make the opening inside the pot, you skate your thumb out nice and flat to make a flat floor for your cylinder or mug shape or whatever you're gonna do. But with a bowl, we don't want a flat floor. We don't really want it to just be flat. I guess you can if you want. There are flat bottom bowls, but I will say, personally, I think it's nice if the bowl has a kind of rounded progression from the center. So you don't really need to do the skater thumb. You can just sort of skip it, honestly. So yeah, we've got the descent. We've got it a little bit thicker. I've kind of maybe scooted my thumb a couple times, just made like a little round sort of shape in the bottom, but no skater thumb. And now it's time to pull. And you know, if you're wanting like a taller, narrow pot, you can kind of pull it into a cylinder shape, right? Something like this is kind of what I'm starting. And then as you go sort of open it out, you know, just be sure you're leaving enough clay to stretch it outwards. Or honestly, you can just sort of, if you know you're gonna go for like a wider shape, you can just start pulling outward from the start, kind of on purpose, right? This should honestly be easy for the beginners because this is kind of what you've already been struggling and like having happen, struggling with and having happen on your cylinders, is it opening up and out too quickly. But that's sort of okay for that to happen with bowls, all right? Because we want them to open outwards. And like I said, I think bowl, like clay always wants to be a bowl. Centrifugal force of this spinning wheel is sort of helping it open out. As far as my method for pulling the walls, nothing is different, right? I did the squeeze on the first pull where I just sort of brought my fingers, my index fingers together. And then from here, I just pull up and out, right, with my fingertips, just like we do on a normal pull, but I'm pulling outward and a little bit at a curve, okay? One thing I will say is even if you are going for a wider bowl, you might not want to go super wide real fast, like too soon, because if you open out too quick, it has a higher chance of kind of collapsing on you. So you notice I pulled the walls pretty tall, pretty fast, but I'm not really pulling them outward very quickly, right? Just a little bit, each pull a little bit more, and honestly, this bowl is pretty much done, okay? I like to add this little extra flare on the rim, kind of like a ramen bowl sort of shape. You can use a rib or just your sponge to sort of round out the inside if you like, but notice, or note that if you push real hard on the outside, it's gonna push more on the outside, push hard on the inside, it's going to make the shape kind of push outward as well. So just kind of be conscious of how you do that, be very light. I still use my right hand for that rib, and I just push very lightly. If you're left-handed, this is a great time to sort of flex that left-handedness, because you can hold the rib with your left hand, just kind of keep your hands in the normal spot and really smooth out the bowl easily. Right-handed people have a little more struggle with that, but that, whichever works for you. Use a sponge, use a rib. Make sure there's no standing water. This is me already kind of doing the typical cleaning step where I've got the water out of the inside, smooth the rim out, and then I might also go ahead and use the rib to smooth the outside here. Right, get some of that gunk off. And yeah, then I'll do the pointy end of the rib tool thing where I sort of bevel it inward. Now, you don't have to cut a lot away there, because remember, we're going to trim it. It doesn't have to be super pretty either, but yeah, you still want to do a little bit of that undercut to help you cut with the wire. I'm trying to think of other things. Oh yeah, there's plenty of other stuff I need to mention now, as far as how you reflect on the shape of the bowl that you've made. So first of all, one thing I want to say, as you're shaping a bowl, something you want to be careful to do, if you're opening out really wide, if you go too wide too fast, right? If you start pushing and say, let's go, I'm gonna point right here, but imagine I'm talking about kind of the inside of this section of the bowl. If you make it too flat and wide too quickly, what can happen is essentially your walls of your bowl will sit outside of this sort of section that is holding the pot to the bat, if that makes sense. It's like the disc, that is at the bottom of the pot. And if you go out too quickly with this section, it will start to slump. And what you'll get is sort of an outward bowl up, and then a dip, and then it might bowl up again. Or you might have it completely, once you get past, you get into that dip, the whole wall completely collapses. That's something we call the beginner hump, the beginner's hump. And it basically is just beginners trying to figure out how to properly make that curve for the inside of the bowl that is wide enough that it has a pretty curve, but not so wide that it collapses over this base, if that makes sense. If that doesn't make sense yet, just keep practicing, and eventually you'll be like, oh, that's what he's talking about. I opened up wider than this bottom portion here, or something like that, yeah. And it takes a long time sometimes to get over that, especially the wider the bowl is that you make, the larger the bowl. When you make plates and stuff like that, it's just super easy. As you start practicing getting walls that are wider than this base, you just go a little too quick and they start to collapse over it. And it doesn't always mean the pot collapses. Sometimes you just end up with this big bump in the middle, and that's why we call it the beginner's hump. Yeah, that makes sense. I hope so. I don't know if I explained that super great, but that's a big thing you want to watch. It's just not going out too quickly, too wide here. And then the other thing I will say, this is, my other biggest tip besides making sure you leave enough clay for trimming is to make sure this rim is as flat as you can get it, okay? One thing I gotta say, so when we go to trim this, we're gonna flip it over and set it on this lip, and then we have to recenter it, and we get it ready, and then we cut into it. And if this lip, this rim is not flat, right, if it's wobbly, you end up with a base that as you're trying to cut it, it's sort of rotating and spitting, and that is not great. So it is the best thing to do to fight that is to try to make sure this rim is as flat as you can get it. Obviously, you should be trying that the entire time throughout the whole process. Yeah, at the end especially, just be sure this is nice and flat. The flatter it is, the easier your life will be. What was I gonna say too? Another thing is, sometimes you're just beginners, right? And it's part of why this whole like flat rim thing is part of why I don't make bowls my first assignment, is that hopefully you've got a little practice, you're learning a little control, and you're learning how to get this top flat. But inevitably, you're still in the beginning stages, so you're gonna have uneven thickness on your bowls sometimes. And what I usually say with that is if you just make sure that the top is flat, right? If you were to lay a board on this, it should be flat. But if the thickness or like the side to side movement is not quite even, right? That's sort of okay. You can work with that, right? I always sort of say like, this is okay, like side to side dance, but it's the up and down dance that causes problems. So even if you have like a thick side here, what you can do is just take your left hand, make sure there's enough water. I've talked about this in several of my demos. Be sure that you've got enough water in your hands and just sort of hold this rim with your left hand while your right index finger or fingers, whatever you're gonna use, just make it nice and flat, right? Here's a good way to do it. Just kind of karate chop one finger down onto that rim, and just be sure again that horizontally this is totally flat. Even if there's side to side or thickness differences, it's okay as long as there's not a up and down difference, right? And I'm just saying this will make your life a lot easier. You're not going to be able to get it perfect, but get as close as you can. And now at this point, I think I've given all my tips as far as like how to shape a bowl versus a cylinder. I always like to leave, in case you guys can't see it, I didn't say this a while ago, but when I smoothed out the inside of my pot with my rib, I left a little spiral in the bottom. I like that, but you don't have to, you can smooth that out. But yeah, I have already undercut. I just remembered I did that already. And now we are ready to cut this piece off. I'm gonna use the method I always teach beginners, a puddle on the opposite side of the pot from you, pull the bowl, the handles real tight on your wire, wrap one side around your fingers, make it just wide enough to slide under the bowl. Obviously with this, because you've made it wider, pay attention to the rim of your bowl and make sure you're not going to hit it with your wrists. But yeah, kind of run this through the water, slide it towards yourself, pull all the way through, okay? That will work. Make sure there was no slack, make sure there was no lift. Be careful setting your wire down, that you don't flick the ball of clay everywhere and stuff like that. All this stuff I've already talked about. And now you got to pick this up. You can do the old method, right, where you spin it and turn it and use the slip and slide like I've taught before. Or my favorite thing about making bowls in this shape and having all this excess clay down here that I know I'm going to clean up anyway, is that I don't have to pick it up with my palms anymore. I don't have to slide it around and pick it up, all sort of stuff. I can do what I call like just turn my hand into two forks, pick this up carefully. Oh, it stuck itself back down. That's okay. I'm not gonna worry about it. Okay, take it down, clean my hands really, really well. I'm just gonna lift this up and pick it up with two fingers, just like this. And I can carry it around and not really worry too much about it. I'll set it on the board that I've prepared so that I can let it get to leather hard and then trim, which I'll show you in another video. But yeah, that's what, and again, I don't really even have to worry about my fingers smudging and all this sort of stuff because I know I'm gonna trim this away and clean it up. So that ends our video for today. Look for the trimming video soon, yeah, or to go along with this. And I hope you enjoyed. Thanks. Oh, also, one last thing. This is sort of funny. I hope, excuse you. But one of the things when you're making your rim totally flat, if you are still having a lot of unevenness and you just can't quite get it right, remember that you can use a needle tool to cut and level out that rim as well. I demonstrated how to do this in the shaping video, but it's very, very handy in this bowl demo, to make sure that you've got that nice flat rim. So yeah, refer to that video for that demo, and remember to utilize that if you need it. Okay, sorry about that. Hope you guys enjoyed, and see you next time.